My name is Dorothy Walsh. I turned 63 in February, in the middle of a snowstorm, alone in a two-bedroom condo, with a store-bought carrot cake and a television program I cannot even remember now. That birthday was the first one without my husband, Gerald. He had passed the March before. Quietly, the way he had lived, no fuss, no drama, just a long exhale one Thursday morning while I was downstairs making oatmeal. 41 years together, and then the oatmeal was only for one. The grief counselor at St. Joseph's told me to find routine. She said routine is what holds a person upright when the ground beneath them has shifted. So I made myself routines. I walked to the park on Dundurn every morning before 7. I called my daughter in Vancouver every Sunday at noon. I volunteered Tuesday and Thursday afternoons at the Neighbour to Neighbour Center on Ottawa Street, helping seniors with estate paperwork, benefit forms, and the kind of administrative tangle that overwhelms people who have spent their whole lives trusting that someone else would sort it out. And every weeknight, I came home on the number 5 bus from downtown, stopped at the Tim Hortons on King Street, ordered a large double-double, tucked a small container of whatever I had baked that day into my canvas tote, and brought it all to the front desk of the Parkview building, my building, for the overnight security guard. His name was Henry Adebayo. Henry was 51 years old, though he looked older in the face and younger in the way he moved. He had done 22 years with the Canadian Army, 2 tours overseas, then a knee injury that ended his service faster than he had planned for. He worked the overnight shift at Parkview 5 nights a week. He was not a man who talked about himself easily. In the beginning, when I first started stopping at his desk in late May, he would thank me for the tea, with a single nod, and return his eyes to the monitor bank in front of him. 6 screens, each cycling through different corners of the building, the lobby, the underground parking, the side entrance near the garbage area, the elevator interiors. I kept coming anyway. I am a librarian by profession, retired now, but 30 years in the Hamilton Public Library system teaches you patience with quiet people. You learn that silence is not rejection. You learn to leave a door open and wait. By July, Henry was telling me about the Army. Not the difficult parts, not at first, but the structural things, the discipline of it, the particular way time moved on base, the strange comfort of knowing exactly what was expected of you each hour of the day. By August, he mentioned a daughter, Simone. She was 28, lived in Mississauga, worked in logistics. They had not spoken in almost 2 years. He said it the way a person says a thing they have rehearsed in their head many times plainly, without inflection, as though the plainness of it could contain the weight. I did not press him on it. I just said I was sorry, and I meant it. I brought him butter tarts because they were Gerald's favorite, and I had begun making them again after a year of not being able to. I brought him oatmeal raisin cookies, lemon squares, the occasional slice of banana bread. It was nothing, truly. It cost me perhaps 20 minutes and a handful of ingredients. But Henry always accepted it with the same careful attention, the same nod, and I think, though I cannot be certain, that it mattered to him in a way that had less to do with the baking and more to do with being remembered. He noticed things, Henry. It was his training, I suppose, but also something innate. He noticed that I always carried my keys in my right hand before I stepped off the elevator. He noticed that the woman in 604 had changed her late-night visitor in October. He noticed the recycling was being sorted incorrectly in the blue bin room, and left a note for management 3 weeks before anyone else caught it. He saw things. He kept track. He was the one who first noticed the man in 811. The man had moved in at the end of September. His name on the lease was Garrett Holt. He was perhaps 45, lean, dressed in the kind of deliberately casual clothes that suggest someone who wants to appear relaxed but is not. He nodded at people in the elevator, but did not speak. He had a newer model pickup truck, gray, Ontario plates, parked in visitor parking more often than resident, which Henry flagged with management twice and was told to leave alone. I had no particular impression of him. We had passed in the hallway. I had said good morning. He had said it back without quite looking at me. What I did not know, through October and into November, was that Henry had begun noticing something about Garrett Holt and me. Not us together, there was no us together, but a pattern. Henry had logged, in the small brown notebook he kept in the desk drawer beneath the monitors, that Garrett Holt appeared in the lobby within 15 minutes of my arrival home, on 9 separate evenings. Not every night, but 9 times in 6 weeks, he had materialized from the elevator, from the male alcove, once from the direction of the parking garage within the window of my return. Henry did not say anything to me immediately. He is not a man who raises alarm before he has evidence. He watched for another week. He noted that Garrett had begun positioning himself near the window facing the street on evenings when my bus typically arrived. He could not see directly from that angle, but he could see the bus stop reflection in the glass of the building across the road. Henry had checked. On a Wednesday evening in late November, I came in from the cold with my canvas bag and my Tim Hortons cup, shaking the slush from my boots on the mat, and Henry looked up from his desk and said, quietly but directly, "Mrs. Walsh, can I ask you to sit with me for a few minutes before you go up?" It was the longest he had spoken to me in one breath in 6 months. I sat in the chair beside the front desk, the one usually reserved for couriers waiting for a signature, and he turned the monitor bank toward me slightly, enough for me to see the parking garage feed. He pulled out the brown notebook. He told me what he had observed. He told me about the 9 evenings, the timing, the window angle. He told me that 2 weeks prior, he had seen Garrett standing near the resident mailboxes at 11:40 at night. Not unusual in itself. But Henry had reviewed the previous week's footage and found the same thing on 3 separate evenings. Always after midnight on the other 2. Always near the cluster that included my box, number 44. "I don't want to frighten you," he said, "but I've been doing this work long enough to know when something isn't random." I sat with that for a moment. The lobby hummed with the heat coming through the vents. Outside, the snow had started properly. I asked him if he thought Garrett Holt was dangerous. Henry was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think he's looking for something. Whether that becomes dangerous depends on whether he finds it." I drove home that night. I had taken the car because of the weather, and I sat at my kitchen table and tried to think about who Garrett Holt was and what connection, if any, he could have to my life. I am a 63-year-old retired librarian who volunteers twice a week. I have a daughter in Vancouver, a modest RRSP, a condo I have owned outright since Gerald's life insurance settled. I do not carry secrets. I do not have enemies. But then I thought about the work. The volunteer work. At Neighbor to Neighbor, I worked primarily with elderly clients who needed help navigating estate and benefits paperwork. I did not make legal decisions. We had a supervising lawyer for that, a kind young woman named Priya who came in on Thursdays. But I sat with clients, organized their documents, helped them understand what they were signing, and sometimes held on to completed forms that needed to be couriered to offices across the city when clients could not manage the trip themselves. In October, I had been assigned to help a woman named Edna Carruthers. She was 81, a retired schoolteacher who had lived alone in a house on Ravenscliffe Avenue since her husband's death 8 years before. She had 2 sons, one in Calgary, one she had not spoken to in a decade, a man named Paul, who had borrowed money from her during a difficult period and never repaid it, and eventually stopped calling altogether. Edna was updating her estate documents to formally remove Paul from her will and establish a small charitable trust in memory of her husband. The documentation was thorough, legally sound, and nearly complete. During one of our sessions, Edna had mentioned, almost in passing, that she had a nephew, not her own nephew, but the nephew of a neighbor she had been close to, a woman who had passed the year before. This nephew had contacted Edna twice, asking about the neighbor's personal papers, which Edna had helped organize and box up after the funeral. Edna thought she had some of them still, mixed in with her own files, and she had been anxious about it. She'd asked me to look through a folder she'd brought in. Nothing financial, letters mostly, a few photographs. But there was one document, a handwritten note, dated 4 years earlier, in which Edna's late neighbor had outlined what she considered an improper arrangement involving a property sale, a sale in which she had been pressured by a family member to sign over her share of a jointly held piece of land for significantly below assessed value. The note named the family member. It was not a legal document, it was not a sworn statement, but it was specific, and it was damning, and the family member's name on it was Garrett Holt. I had flagged it to Priya and set the folder in the secure cabinet at the center. I had not thought about it since, except to note it in my volunteer log. I thought about it now. I went to my spare room and found the copy of my volunteer log. I keep duplicates at home, an old habit from 30 years of library administration, and I found the entry. October 19th. Edna Carruthers. Folder containing personal papers from estate of late neighbor, including one handwritten document naming G. Holt in connection with property transaction approximately 4 years prior, flagged to Supervisor P. Sharma. Garrett Holt had moved into my building at the end of September. 3 weeks before I had flagged that document. I did not sleep well that night. In the morning I called Priya. She was measured, careful, the way good lawyers are. She told me that what I had described, a neighbor moving into my building, timing his appearances to coincide with mine, was not by itself actionable. But she also told me that the document in Edna's file was potentially significant in the context of a civil dispute Edna's late neighbor's family had quietly initiated regarding the property sale. She asked me to write down everything I remembered and send it to her. I went back to Henry that evening. I brought him his tea, though neither of us drank it right away. I told him what I had pieced together. I told him about Edna, about the folder, about the property note, about Garrett Holt's name on it. Henry listened without interrupting. When I finished, he opened his brown notebook to a fresh page and wrote the date at the top. He said, "Then he's not looking for you. He's looking for what you might have." Over the following 2 weeks, Henry documented everything he had observed with a precision that I imagine came directly from his military training. Dates, times, durations, camera references. He noted twice when Garrett's mail, rather than being collected in the evening the way most residents did, had been left untouched for 4 days and then taken all at once late at night, which Henry found consistent with someone who was spending time away and not wanting to appear absent. He noted that Garrett had, on one occasion, stood near the front desk, while Henry stepped briefly to the washroom and had spent approximately 90 seconds in the vicinity of the resident directory binder before leaving. The camera caught it clearly. Henry also contacted a former colleague, a woman who had transitioned from the military into private security consulting in Oakville, and asked her opinion, strictly in general terms, about the behavioral pattern. She told him it was consistent with someone conducting low-level surveillance on a specific individual. She suggested documentation and police involvement if anything escalated. Priya called me on a Thursday afternoon in early December to tell me that the civil dispute regarding the property had moved forward and that Edna's late neighbor's daughter had formally submitted the handwritten note as evidence. She also told me that Garrett Holt had been identified by the opposing legal team as a person of interest in the matter and had been asked to provide documentation. He had not complied. 3 days later, Henry called me on my cell number, which I had given him in November. It was just past 11 at night. He said, calmly, "Mr. Holt is currently in the parking garage. He is at your car. I have the camera running and I am calling non-emergency now. Please stay in your unit." He had not touched the car. When Hamilton police attended, what they found was Garrett crouched beside my driver's side door with a small magnetic GPS tracker in his hand. He had not yet attached it. He was detained, questioned, and ultimately released that night. But the tracker was noted and photographed and added to the growing file Priya was assembling. 2 weeks before Christmas, Garrett Holt was served with a civil injunction related to the property dispute. He vacated his unit in the Parkview building before the new year. I watched him carry boxes to his gray truck one Sunday afternoon from my 8th floor window, and I felt something I could not quite name. Not relief exactly. Or not only relief, but the particular exhaustion that comes from being frightened quietly for a long time and then no longer needing to be. Henry testified in the civil proceeding via written affidavit the following spring. His documentation, 11 pages in the small brown notebook, cross-referenced with time-stamped camera footage, was described by the presiding judge as unusually thorough and materially significant to establishing a pattern of behavior. The dispute was resolved in favor of Edna's late neighbor's daughter. The property, which had been sold at a price nearly 40% below its assessed value, was found to have been transferred under what the court characterized as undue pressure. Garrett Holt was ordered to pay a significant sum in damages. Edna called me after the ruling. She cried, which I was not prepared for, and I cried a little too, which I think surprised us both. She said she had not been able to speak to her late neighbor in the final weeks before she passed, and that knowing someone had finally named what had been done to her felt like a door being unlocked. I thought about that for a long time afterward. The door being unlocked. On the evening, Henry told me about the tracker. Before the police arrived, I had stood at my kitchen window and thought about the Tuesday in May when I had first stopped at his desk with a tea and a bag of oatmeal cookies. I had not done it because I expected anything. I had done it because Gerald was gone, and the building felt large, and I did not want to be the kind of person who walked past another person every evening without acknowledging them. That was all. Gerald always said that courtesy was the smallest possible gift you could give someone, and it cost nothing and was never wasted. I had believed that before he told me, and I believed it after, but in those months following his death I had needed reminding. Henry, for his part, never once made me feel as though what he had done was extraordinary. He said he had noticed things because noticing things was what he did. He said it mattered to him that people in the building were safe, full stop. But I know, in the way you know things, after months of standing at someone's desk in the late evening and learning the shape of how they speak and what they do not say, I know that it was not nothing to him, being brought tea, being baked for, being asked about his daughter. Simone called him in April. I do not know exactly what prompted it. Henry did not say, and I did not ask. What he told me, on a quiet Thursday when I came in later than usual, and the lobby was empty, was that she had called and they had talked for 2 hours, and that he was going to drive to Mississauga the following weekend to see her. He said it looking straight at his monitors, in the way he said things that mattered to him, as though the monitors were a kind of anchor. I told him I was glad. He said he was too. Then he looked at me and said, "Thank you for the shortbread, Mrs. Walsh," and nodded in that way of his, and I knew he was not only talking about the shortbread. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the 8th floor, and thought about Gerald, and about the grief counselor's advice: find your routines. Let them hold you upright, and I thought that she had been right, but not in the way I had originally understood. It was not the routine itself that held you. It was what the routine opened. The small repeated act. The cup of tea. The knock on a door you keep knocking on even when no one answers immediately, because eventually, if you are patient and you mean it, someone on the other side will hear you. I am not a person who believes that kindness is a transaction. I am not kind because I expect something back. Gerald taught me that, and before Gerald my mother taught me that, and I imagine her mother taught her the same in a different language in a different century. Kindness is not a strategy. It is not an investment. It is the most basic acknowledgement that the person in front of you is real and present and worth a moment of your attention. But I will tell you this, and I mean it plainly. Kindness keeps its own accounts. Not in the way of ledgers and debts and balances owing. In the way that who you are, repeated daily in small gestures, leaves a shape in the world around you. And sometimes, in ways you could not have planned or predicted or asked for, that shape is what saves you. Every weeknight, I still bring Henry his tea. I still bake on Sunday afternoons. Enough for 2. This past December, I brought a small wrapped gift to the desk, a new notebook, brown cover, same as the one he kept in the drawer. He held it for a moment without speaking. Then he said, "You didn't have to do that." I said, "I know." He nodded. I went upstairs. Outside, it was snowing again, the way it always is here in December, the way it has always been. the city going quietly about its business in the cold. I stood at my kitchen window for a while with a cup of tea and watched the snow come down past the streetlights on the road below, and thought that for the first time in a long time, I was not waiting for anything. I was simply here, in the life I had, grateful for what was ordinary and unafraid of the dark. Be kind not because it makes you safe. Be kind because it makes you human. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, it makes the people around you truly see you, and that is worth more than safety. That is worth everything.